This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abam. Hope everybody's doing well. Welcome everybody. We're continuing in Mishna Berura, Daf Hashavua. We are learning Siman Ches. Siman Ches is the Hilchos Tzitzis. So we began a new Miktsaya in Halacha, Hilchos Tzitzis. And we are now up to Sif Vav. Al talis katan yachal levarich lehisatef afal pi she'einu mesatef ela loivshai. For on the talis katan, you could make the bracha lehisatef, even though you're not actually wrapping yourself with it, you're just wearing it. Haga, says Rama, v'yeshayim shemavarchin olav al mitzvahs tzitzis. Some say the proper bracha is al mitzvahs v'chei noyagin. That's the custom in l'shanois. Do not deviate, says Rama, the name of the Kolbai. So the Mechaber is saying on a talis katan, you could make l'hisatef even though you're not wrapping, you're only wearing it. And some say that you're mavarich on it al mitzvah tzitzis, and that's the minog, and we're not going to deviate from the minog. Says the Mishna Berura, siv katan tezayin ela loivshai, v'habracha hi l'hisatef. The bracha is l'hisatef, ki nusach habracha kachu. That is the text of the bracha. K'mayulei shev basukah. So what's the Mishna Berura saying? That you can make the bracha l'hisatef even though you're not mesatef, you're just wearing it, you're just putting it on. What's the Mishna Berura trying to say? The Mishna Berura, I believe, is bringing an instance where the text of the bracha is not perfectly accurate to the mitzvah. Lamashal, there's a mitzvah to sit in the sukkah. There's no mitzvah to sit in a sukkah. I'm standing up in the sukkah. I'm talking to my friend. Sit down! Well, why should I say? Because you made a bracha, leishev. There's no mitzvah to sit in the sukkah. Let's say I took a chair and I put it outside my sukkah. I'm doing an aveira sitting outside the sukkah. You're not to eat outside the sukkah. The mitzvah is eating, but the nusuch habracha is leishev. I believe what the Mishna Berura is saying is that even though you're not actually being misatef, it's okay to say a nusuch habracha that's not perfectly accurate to what the definition of the mitzvah is. In other words, it seems like the Mishna Berura is saying, and it seems like the Mechaber then is saying, that the text of the bracha does not have to capture the essence of what the Maisa mitzvah is. In other words, if somebody eats a sandwich standing up in a sukkah, they're mekayim the mitzvah deraisa. If they eat the sandwich outside the sukkah, they're mevatel the mitzvah. Somebody sits outside the sukkah, they're not doing anything wrong. So you see from there, I believe, that the nusach habracha does not have to. I mean, you could ask. Certainly, Anshe Kesach Doila were masaking the bracha with tremendous chachma. So why they were masaking the bracha lehisatef? It's not so clear. Where's Mayor Jacobson? Meir was pointing out, why do you have to do a atifa? The Mishna Berura pointed out there's no remez b'chalal in the pasuk to atifa. Now I'll give you a little, this is Parsha Shlach, and my mind is churning that the Meraglim were sent out of Midbar Paran, which is the land of Yishmael, and somehow the atifas Yishmaelim is a tikkun. I'm working, you could come up with all kinds of, but al pi halacha, we don't necessarily understand why atifa is even necessary. Okay, Sif Katan Yud Zayin. Ve'en l'shanes. Hainu b'talis katan. A talis katan we don't deviate. Shalanu she'en misatfim by. So we make al mitzvahs. Aval b'talis katan she'misatif by. Kamavar b'sif gimel yachal l'chachil l'varch l'satif. In Sif Gimel, the Mechaber talked about a talis katan that toiv l'haniach oisei aroishay rachbel l'kamas l'satif by v'yamad kach me'utav. So that talis katan, you l'chadchila should make or could make l'satif if the evid and berach b'chol talis katan l'satif. But the evid if you made on any talis katan l'satif or shebech al talis gada al mitzvah yatsa, either nusach. But the evid works for either mitzvah. V'da dein levarich al talis katan ad shia al kapanim arkoi shloishes rivei ama l'chol tzad. Don't make a bracha on a talis katan until you have at the very least 3/4 of an amma in each direction. V'nekev beis hatzavar ein oila min haminyan. So now it's going to depend what an amma is. If an amma is 2 feet, so then 3/4 of an amma would be, if an amma is 24 inches, so then 3/4 of an amma is going to be 18 inches. Yeah? If an 18 inches wide. If an amma is bigger, if an amma is smaller, then it could be smaller. We'll have to see what the shiurim are. V'nekev beis hatzavar ein oila min haminyan. V'gam shia pasuach rubai. It has to be mostly open. V'anshe ma'isa noigim amma melefneim v'amma melachreim. People of who are medaktik and halacha, they're noig to make an amma in front of them and an amma behind them. Now the Mishna Berura does not say to have an amma in the width. First the Mishna Berura says, don't make the bracha until it's shloishes revei amma l'chol tzad. Achi al kapanim orko shloishes revei amma l'chol tzad. Actually, the Mishna Berura doesn't talk about the roichav whatsoever. No mention is made of how wide it should be. It seems like it's better to have an amma in the front and an amma behind. V'ay Mishna Berura Beracha b'siman tazayin mashe kosafti oid me'inyin zeh. Okay, Sif Zayin. Tzarech lahafrid chutei hatzitzis zamizeh. You need to separate the strings of the tzitzis one from the other. You need to separate the strings of the tzitzis one from the other. Says in Mishna Berura, zamizeh kol chut b'fnei atzmai. Every string by itself. Shelo yu misubachin echad mechaver. So they're not intertwined and tangled. Why? The Chai Adam says something very interesting. The Dirshu quotes. Tzitzis is milasha in the pasuk in Yechezkel, vayikacheni b'tzitzis roishi. And just like the hair of the head are separate, so too the strings of tzitzis should be separate. Since the word tzitzis, it could refer to the hair of the head, and people's hair are separate, especially if they bathe and they actually wash their hair. So too, the tzitzis should be separate. What if your process of separating your tzitzis will delay you from davening b'tzibur? The Magen Avraham says you don't have to be careful about this. Kasav Ho'ari, the Ari says as follows: Tzitzis Roshei Tevois Tzadik Yafrid Tzitziyosav Tamid. A tzaddik separates their tzitzis always. Now, don't make a mistake of how to read this. Don't think it means that if I separate my tzitzis always, that means I'm a tzaddik. No. You don't become a tzaddik by separating your tzitzis. If you're already a tzaddik. Now, you wonder, how do I become a tzaddik? That's a very long conversation. But once you've made it to that echelon, someone who's made it to be considered a tzaddik, a guy like that, he's always separating his tzitzis. But you're not considered a tzaddik because you do that. Okay, just making clear. It says, let's see the Ber Halacha. Tzarech lahafrid. Ayin b'Mishna Berura mashik kasavna dim nishta. The Mishna Berura quotes the Magen Avraham, if you're going to be delayed, don't come late to shul because you're separating your tzitzis. The guy rolls in by the last halukah. Where were you? I was separating my tzitzis. Pal, get to shul and, either get up earlier or come into shul with intertangled tzitzis. V'tama Magen Avraham. What's the reason for the Magen Avraham that you don't have to be medaktik? Interesting. So this is not like the Dirshu. So this would have been nice if the Dirshu would have told us that, this is not the real reason is not the Chai Adam. Chai Adam is not the real reason because it's like your hair. The real reason is the Bir Halacha. Nowadays, it's Zeicher. What's the reason to separate? Because you need to see the Tcheles and the white. But we don't have Tcheles. So if it's only a Zeicher, it's not a big deal. So the first thing we see from here is that the Chai Adam's reason is like a secondary reason. The main reason to separate your tzitzis is you need to separate the tzitzis and the leaven. Now, As you know, I'm not a proponent of the modern tcheles, but for those who do, they have to separate their tzitzis. They're going to have to, otherwise what are they doing? Then midina, in other words, for those who are makbid on the tcheles, or they want to be mahadir with that, they have to separate their tzitzis. The Gra says even mizman hazeh you got to separate them. The Oilas also follows the Gra. Efsher, according to them, it could be. Now, the Gra learns me'ikar adin you have to separate. It seems that according to the Gra, if your tzitzis are intertangled, you can't make a bracha. Or, says Mishna Berura, it could be, even the Gra would say it's not worse than gardume tzitzis. The Dirsha brings the Chazonish says, Lamais is not ma'akev, al-kopanim l'chachil ba'adei achil ba'afridon, me'em esavachim kadosh yivarach alehem. Lamaisa, there would be a chiyuv to separate them before you make a bracha. Now, nowadays, we don't make a bracha on the talis katan. So there's less of a reason to have to separate the strings of the talis katan. But the talis gadol, if you have the time, you should separate the strings. Okay, let's begin Sif Ches. Yechavein behisatfoi, you should have kavana when you are ma'atif in the talis, shetzivanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu lehisatif boy, kedei shenizgar kol mitzvoisav la'asoisam. The reason why the Almighty commanded us to wrap ourselves in the talis is in order that we remember all the mitzvahs to do them. Says the Mishna Berura, Sivkata Yates, v'zehu milvad hakavana shetzarach lechavin belavisha l'kayim mitzvah tzitzis. There's another thing over here. Mitzvah tzrichas kavana. That whenever you do a mitzvah, you have to be mechavein that you're doing you're doing a commandment of God. You can't just put on tzitzis. You have to be mechavein. I'm putting on this garment. I'm putting on the tzitzis to be mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis. So aside from this extra kavana that you're putting on the tzitzis in order to remember all the mitzvahs, you also have to be mechavein that you're being mekayim a mitzvah. Now, do we paskin mitzvah sirus kavana? Avada, we do. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Samach Siv Dalid brings two opinions, and he says the halacha is mitzvah sirus kavana. So, are you telling me that if I put on my talis and I wasn't mechavein, that I'm being mekayim the mitzvah of wearing tzitzis, I'm not yotzei the mitzvah? I'm not telling you that. The Shulchan Aruch is telling you that. Shulchan Aruch says you're not mekayim the mitzvah. So then, what does that mean? When I go up after 120, I'm not going to get schar for putting on a talis? Well, maybe you had the right thought when you put on tefillin, and you get schar for tefillin. So you might have done other good deeds in your life. But tzitzis will not have been one of them if you don't have that kavana. Now we'll see. The Mishna Berura brings later the shita of Chai Adam. There might be a svara of staman lishma. But that's a shita of the Mishna Berura. We'll go a little further. V'kasav habach. The Bach writes, Shekein adin betfilin v'sukkah, that this extra kavana applies when you put on tefillin and when you wear sukkah. After b'shar mitzvos yotzei av shalei mechavim ba'davar, even though other mitzvos you're yotzei, even if you didn't have this extra kavana. Ki im sha'oisa mitzvah l'shem Hashem, other than the kavana that you're doing the mitzvah for the sake of Hashem shetziva la'asoisa. Hanoch shani, these mitzvos, tzitzis, tefillin, sukkah are different. The betzitzis ksiv lema'an tizkeru. It says in order, do the mitzvah in order to remember the other mitzvahs. Uv'tefillin, by tefillin it says lema'an tia taras Hashem beficha, in order the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth, that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim biyad chazaka. And by sukkos lema'an yedu doirei seichem. What if a person was not mechavein that? Are they yotzei? Says the Mishna Berura, mikol makom nira dechol zeh lecharchila. This is all lecharchila kedei lekayim ha-mitzvah b'shleimusa. This extra kavana is lecharchila in order to make the mitzvah in its fullness. Aval b'di'eved, af imloi kiven b'chol elu rak lekayim ha-mitzvah saseh yatsa. If you did not have in mind you're wearing tzitzis to remember the other mitzvahs, if you didn't have in mind by telling you're wearing tefillin, Laman tia taras Hashem beficha. If you did not have in mind by sukkah that you're sitting in the sukkah, Laman yedid dorasechem, you're yotzei, provided you're a mechavein to mekayim a mitzvah. But if you are not mechavein to mekayim a mitzvah, loy yatsa, you are not yotzei. That's the shita of the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishna Berura. V'yachar kach matzasi Prima Gadim Siman Chafei Shekasav Ken. The Prima Gadim agrees. This extra kavanah is only lecharchila. V'chein mashna ba'olas tamid u'beber hagra. That even by tzitzis ein hakavana liikuva. It's mashma then the telling the Beracha that even by tzitzis the extra kavana is not ma'akev. So here's your homework for today. Why does the Mishna Berura say even by tzitzis? Why? Is there more of a reason to have the extra kavanah by tzitzis than, let's say, tefillin or sukkah? Now I want to tell you something. We'll revisit this tomorrow. The Mishna Berura says that at least you have to have in mind to mekayim the mitzvah. What if you weren't mechavein to mekayim the mitzvah? So you don't get the mitzvah. Not only do you not get the mitzvah, you are mevatel the mitzvah of tzitzis. You wore a four-cornered garment without tzitzis. You hear this? If you put on talis in the morning and you were not think, I'm doing the mitzvah of Hashem, don't say, yeah, of course that's what I'm doing. No, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's not enough to assume, of course that's what you're doing. You have to explicitly think you're being mekayim the mitzvah of Hashem. If you don't, the Bir Halacha says in Siman Samach Seif Dalid, you're mevatel the mitzvah of tzitzis. We'll revisit that tomorrow. Rabbi, say have a great day. Kol tov.
Can I ask one thing?
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't hear good. Leishan Bastika means to sit or to live in the sit?
Again, the literal meaning is to sit, you know. The literal meaning, I think the Mishna Berura is bringing a raya from there that sometimes the text of the bracha is not necessarily the definition of the mitzvah. Okay? Shkoyach, everyone, have a good day. Kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.